Okay. I think we've got some viewers. There we go. Okay. The numbers are all caught up. Everybody seems to be happy. YouTube is happy with this thing. I'm just going to scooch my chair a bit. All right. Welcome to the show. It's Sunday morning here in my neck of the woods. I've got the windows closed, but you may still hear some airplane noise. The largest air show in the world is just finishing up today here in town. It's every late July, and we have 500,000 people, literally 500,000 people, come to my relatively small city, and a bunch of airplanes, 25,000 airplanes. So yeah, it's sometimes noisy. If you listen real close to the Friday video, there's at least one spot where I'm talking, and then you can hear one of the Blue Angels, the fancy schmancy jet team. You can hear them in the background doing some sort of practice on Thursday night while I was trying to make my video. It slowed things down, let's just say that. So let's see here. What have we got? Canada, Ohio, Liberty Township in Ohio, south of France, Brooklyn, New York, good morning, Belgium, Scotland, France, Vancouver, Florida. Hail and greetings from Istanbul, again, not Constantinople. I'm getting chuckles from the peanut gallery. Bristol, UK, British Columbia. What else have we got here? Say hello to J Tick. How you doing? Melanie Dawn, VJ Morph. Got the Drop Podcast here. Morning to you guys. Let's see here. Ireland, Sydney, the Netherlands, Nottingham. Jason Southard says, I've been to Oshkosh EA event. It is an awesome event. It is. It's a huge... I used to work for the company that puts it on. I worked for them for 8 years. And yeah, it's huge. It's really, really crazy huge. So, Idaho, Poland, Serbia, Swindon, Spokane, Washington, Birmingham, Germany, South Korea, Madison, Wisconsin. Pretty close. Adelaide, let's see here. South Korea, Denmark, Canada, Germany. Got all over the place. Netherlands, Christopher Dick from Milwaukee. Hi, Chris. Scotland, Germany, Utah. Lee Marone from Oshkosh, Wisconsin. Probably never heard of it. Hi, Lee. Lee is my second cousin, FYI. So we got that going on. Let's see here. Jez from Newcastle, Netherlands, Brazil. Nice. Got all kinds of people. Excellent. Who, if you guys haven't, this just came to mind. If you guys haven't, you should really go and try to fill out the Great Wargamer survey. I linked to it last week, I think, on the Facebook page. But if you just do a Google search for Great Wargaming Survey, you'll find it. It's put on by Wargame Soldier and Strategy magazine. They've been doing it since I think 2013 every year, and it's just like a Survey Monkey online survey. It's not super long, and I think you can maybe win something potentially. I forget. But I think at the end there was some sort of like there's a drawing or something. But it's just really good for everybody, just for the industry. It's really interesting information. So. They do a podcast as well, and I was on the podcast kind of sort of analyzing the information last year. So I hope I can do that again with them again this year. I see Matthew Sears, Mr. Moderator Matt, is here today. That's good to see. Computer's updating on the phone for now. Hola from Chicago. Got Cheryl's Knight from England, Sunderland, Indiana. Going to be going to Indiana, Calvin, very soon, in about 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks, about that. Going to GenCon. Looking forward to it. Going to be going with Mr. Matthew Sears there, Mr. J Tick, going with him, and a whole bunch of other people. We're going to be staying in a humongous hotel room, a suite, and there's going to be a whole bunch of us in there, so it's going to be an adventure. Excuse me. It's not Sunday morning if my throat's not screwed up. Hang on a second. Okay. So, yeah, it's going to be kind of crazy. 50th Gen Con. I was at the 25th. I think that was my first in 1992, I believe. So I'm looking forward to it. I just was actually talking with another guy that I'm going to yesterday, and we were discussing travel plans. And we're gonna be swinging by and picking up moderator Matt, and we'll be heading to Indiana. It's about from here. It's about 6.5 hours, so it's not a terrible drive. But alrighty, what else have we got? VJ Morph says that the survey's been done. Good, excellent. Hope you guys have done that. Winterstorm asks, so what's the survey? It's a survey of questions about wargaming habits, what kind of genres you play, you know, it's some demographic information. How old are you? When did you start playing? You know, that kind of stuff. Is it about titles specifically? There's little bits of it that are about titles specifically, but it's also, you know, like how often do you play in competitive events? How far, you know, do you play mostly at your store or your home? Things like that. And it's just very interesting as a survey to be able to look at and say, you know, a couple of years ago, I did a video about, are you old enough for historical gaming? And in that, I said, well, I hit about the age of 42, and all of a sudden this light went off in my head. And then all of a sudden I got interested in, you know, World War II stuff a little bit and started playing Flames of War and things like that. And it turns out when they went through and did the survey a couple of years later, they said that the average age for people to start playing historical games was 42, which was dead on exactly when I started. So it's an interesting information like that that kind of comes up. So yeah, it's just a good survey to learn things about, and it's interesting to see the overall hobby, you know, the wargaming industry sort of as a snapshot. And because they're basically just a magazine, it's more of a news thing. It's not like, I mean, obviously stores can use the information to some degree to understand their demographic and the people that are coming to their stores. Hopefully the industry looks at it a bit and goes, oh, okay, I see. There are actually a lot of people who are interested in this game. We should make a game like that. Stuff like that. So, yeah, it's kind of interesting. Let me see here. What else have we got? Josh McCarthy's here. Hi, Josh. How's he going? My phone always defaults to my other YouTube account. Such a pain. Yeah, I was having some trouble yesterday with the YouTube app on my phone. It was I was trying to switch from the Tabletop Minions account to my personal account because I wanted to send somebody a link to a channel that I had subscribed, and it was just, as a person who does this for a living, and not this, but UX, UI, you know, mobile design, it was one of those things like it took me forever to figure out, oh, that's how you do it. And so that's maybe not necessarily the greatest user experience, but there it is. The Drop Podcast says, GenCon is so close to Nova Open, but if we don't see you, hope to see you at the next big event. Maybe someday I'll get to GenCon. GenCon's really cool. That being said, it is... How am I going to put this? I think that every tabletop gamer should, if they can swing it, get a chance to go there, they should go there at least once. It's kind of a bit of a pilgrimage to some degree. As wargamers, we're just a quarter of, well, far less than a quarter, frankly. I always believe that there are four main genres in tabletop gaming. You've got board gaming, CCGs, you know, card gaming, Magic, and whatnot. You've got RPGs, and then you've got wargaming. So those are the four genres. As far as representation at Gen Con, wargaming is probably the smallest. It's still, I mean, big. I mean, don't get me wrong. It's 60,000 people at the convention, but it's still kind of a smaller thing. So yeah, there's that. If you really want to go to a good, you know, wargaming convention, I will tell you every day, Adepticon is the one to go to. That's my favorite. So yeah, but yeah, definitely. That's the way. You know, if you want to go to something that's really wargaming focused, Gen Con is not particularly. There's lots of cool stuff to see. If you're the kind of person who's into wargaming but also board gaming, and also you play some Magic on the side, well, then it's a perfect fit because you've got so many different kind of tastes to be able to, you know, test out. But and there's other stuff too, cosplay, and there's some anime. I mean, there's like, and there's a film series that go. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that goes on. But yeah, definitely. Question. Found the starter set for Wild West Exodus on a good price. Have you painted any minis? I've heard good things. I have not painted any of the Wild West Exodus minis. I have seen a bunch of them painted by James Wapple. I could think of his wife's name, and I couldn't think of his name. Yeah, James Wapple did a ton of them. If you watched the video from Adepticon where I talked to the 6 different pro painters or whatever, James was one of them, and he does amazing work. And so I've seen really, really nicely painted stuff from them, but I have not painted them. I talked to somebody who, and I don't know if these are if you're looking at the newer plastic ones or if you're looking at the original resin ones. The original resin ones had very little in the way of mold lines. The people I've talked to said they've had pretty decent luck with the mold lines. The newer plastic line, that I don't know much about, so I don't know how the mold lines are for that. So yeah, that's pretty cool. Jessie Daniels says probably 100,000 people this year. I don't know if, well, I'm assuming you're talking about GenCon. GenCon's been hovering at around 60,000. I'm hoping that's not the case for this. I'm hoping that 100,000 people show up because that'll be really rough. That being said, they have said that they're sold out of 4-day passes. They're sold out of Saturdays and Sundays, I think. So yeah. BJ Morph, hey Adam, have you seen Luke's APS video? Oh, Luke APS, Luke's affordable painting service. I've seen the channel. Have you seen his videos on painting with Sharpies and Gundam markers? Thoughts on using markers to paint? Have you tried it? The only kind of markers I've ever used on any models are, and I just did it again recently actually, there are really super crazy thin markers called Pigma Micron markers, and if you buy them in the 005 size, which is the smallest size I think that they make, I have used them to like write on scrolls. I just had a character recently I just finished, and there's gonna be a picture of him soon in the Paint Showcase Club, and he's a Dark Apostle, and he's got like a banner, and it's got like a parchment kind of hanging off of it, and I wanted to write a bunch of things on the parchment, and since I couldn't get a brush that was that fine, I decided to use one of those markers. Now the problem with the marker is that it takes a little bit longer to dry, and it has a tendency to dry kind of shiny. It's a little glossy, so you definitely want to hit it with dull coat. But I've never used markers to actually I'm assuming you mean like maybe just doing the trim around shoulder pads and stuff like that. I mean, you could do it. Again, it's going to be kind of glossy, most of those things, especially if you're putting it straight on plastic. I don't know how well it would work if you're putting it over paint. Like if you painted the model green and then you decided to do black rim on, say, a shoulder pad for like a Space Marine. I don't know how well, if that black Sharpie ink wouldn't maybe like ruin the paint underneath it. That's a good question. I don't know. Melody Dawn says, I only see the survey from 2016. Can't find one for this year. If you look through Facebook on my site, or my Facebook page for Tabletop Minions, I think I linked to it. I want to say it's within the last 2 weeks. So if you're looking for it there. Anthony B says, how did you like the last podcast on the Left show? It looked like a lot of fun. Yeah, it was a good time. Sam and I, Painter Sam, went down to Milwaukee to see Last Podcast on the Left. I've talked about them before. They're it's a podcast that I listen to all the time, and it's 3 comedians, and they talk about aliens and conspiracy theories and serial killers. I mean, they do a ton of research, and they talk about, like, they just recently did one about they've done Jeffrey Dahmer. They've done the Zodiac Killer, and they do a bunch of research. They did one about, what's his name? Jack the Ripper. But they also talk about reptilians and, Scientologists and all kinds of stuff. And they're talking about the research, but they're doing it in a funny way because they're comedians, which I enjoy and whatever. So it's crude. It's a crude show, but it is a lot of fun. I enjoy it. And so seeing them live was a lot of fun too. Iron Fang says, Adam, any thoughts on GW nerfing flyers in the new edition? Well, from what I understand, they didn't so much nerf the flyers as much as they made it a requirement that at least somebody was standing on the ground. If you know what I mean? Like, what the problem was, from what I understand, and I'm not a competitive player, so I very possibly could be wrong with this. the concept was that people in competitions were playing. They were just bringing flyers and some guys in the flyers, and then the flyers would just fly around the field, and there would be nobody on the ground. And then it was very difficult for anyone to hit them. Like they could only be assaulted, I guess, by other things with the fly keyword, and it's harder to shoot them. And there's all these problems. So GW recently had said, okay, well, if you don't want to be tabled, you have to have at least somebody on the ground. You can't just be all flying around. As a person who doesn't play competitively, I'm fine with that. I don't know. I mean, it makes sense. You know, it's very difficult to take over a piece of land if you don't have anybody standing on it. You know, you can fire missiles into a country, you can fly over and bomb and do stuff like that, but you need boots on the ground, as they say. So it makes sense to me, but I don't really know a ton about the competitive meta and the competitive scene, specifically for 40K or whatever, but yeah, definitely. Bloodthirst asks, what would you have done for Uncle Tickles if you didn't have an airbrush? Okay, well, that's a good question. So, mostly the airbrush was used on the lightning claws, which I painted basically like I wanted to paint them like I paint most of my power swords and stuff like that. And everybody's got a different style on how they paint power swords. I usually go the light blue to white kind of fade sort of a thing. I just kind of like the look of it. So in that situation, I would have probably either A, had to really step up my wet blending game, which is hard, but doable. If you look at the video, it's actually Sam's most popular video on this channel. It's about how to paint a power sword. He did that all with wet blending and didn't use his airbrush. So I would have had to try to, attempt that and get better at that and go that direction. So if you haven't watched that video about how to do a power sword, that'd be the way to, to start. Another option would be, and this would look a little bit fuzzier, but probably layers of dry brushing. Like I'd paint the entire thing sky blue, the whole each claw, and then I would start with just a touch of white added to it, and then some dry brushing, and then a little touch more, and then some more dry brushing. I don't know that it would work as well, but it might. And and again, you don't have to make, like, lightning claws don't have to be that light blue to white thing. That's just the way I like to do them. You can make yours silver. Some people will make like power swords and things like that. They'll make them silver, but then give them maybe like a blue wash, so they've got like a little bit of a blue tinge and maybe some edge highlighting. It kind of gives them sort of an interesting look. There's lots of different things you can look for, like how to paint power swords. Just do a search for that on YouTube and see what and then just do a Google image search rather than the normal text search. Just switch over to images. You might see all kinds of things and be like, that I can do, I know for a fact, with a brush, and I really like the way it looks. And then you can kind of go from there. That's the way I would look at it. So yeah. What else have we got here? We've got a bunch of conversation going on here. Torch. I can't wait for the Necron Codex. I played against the new Space Marine Codex yesterday and got decimated. It's been hard to find the new Space Marine Codex. Like, from what I understand, it's been not. If you're a GW store, like a specific Games Workshop store, from what I understand, they have it. But a lot of the independent stores didn't get theirs yet, which is kind of weird. So I don't know. I'm thinking about. I may just get it just on my iPad anyway, just because it's nicer. I don't know. I don't have to carry around an extra book all the time. So we'll see how it goes. But do you think Games Workshop will be attending more fairs from now on, like Essen Spiel? And do you think that and what do you think about the Game of Thrones, the new tabletop game that is now on Kickstarter? From what I know of Essen is very, very board game related. So I don't know if they'll go to that or not. They may target it, and it's not. It's closer. Germany's closer to them than the United States are, and they're going to be at we're at Adepticon. They're going to be at the Las Vegas Open. I don't know if they're at the Nova Open. They're going to be at GenCon. So it's a good question. As far as the Game of Thrones game, the Song of Ice and Fire or whatever, it's from what I can tell, it's a rank and flank game. So you're pushing around like trays of units, and I'm not usually generally into that. That's why I didn't get into Warhammer Fantasy. So yeah, I don't know. The models look great, don't get me wrong. I have not really seen much about the rules, but just seeing the rank and flank, I was like, meh, I've currently got enough games, so I probably don't see myself getting into it. Hey, hon, we definitely need to put some sort of googly eyes on your cello case. People are asking about it again. Let's see here. And then J Tick says revealed that the Chaos Codex is pre-ordered next week. That'll be kind of cool. I played a game yesterday actually against with my Nurgle and basically Khorne Berserker list. I played against Thousand Suns yesterday, and it was a good time. Played with a guy named Matt, who's a guy I've known for quite a while, and he's a good guy. His list was tough, and I did not win, but I did okay. You know, it was not too bad. I killed at least one Demon Prince and some other stuff. But yeah, those Thousand Sun guys are tough nuts to crack. Oh gosh, what else have we got? Bloodthirst. Is Primaris really that bad for Warhammer? I don't think so. I think they're cool looking models. I'm looking forward to, like, my once I get my Chaos up to about 2,000 points, which will be quite soon, because all I have to do to get it to 2,000 points at this point is add 2 more Hellbrutes and a unit of Obliterators. The Obliterators are built but not primed, and the 2 Hellbrutes are built, primed, based, and highlighted, and now I just need to start doing detail. So I think after that I'm going to start working on my own Imperium list, which will be predominantly like a lot of it will be the Primaris guys that came in the new starter set, because I like the look of them. So yeah, I don't mind them, but I don't know. I think that Games Workshop does want to go to making larger models. I mean, if you look at them in comparison to the regular Space Marines, obviously they're larger. They've added into the story why that's so. But if you look at the Death Guard and you put them up against the old Plague Marines, they're also a bit larger, you know. But if you go back and even look at Dark Vengeance back in, was that 6th edition when that first came out? The Dark Vengeance? I believe so. Those models are a bit bigger than a normal, like a Berserker or a Chaos Space Marine. You know, the models that are in that book or in that box are beefy, and they're cool models, you know. So I don't know. That doesn't bother me too much. Let's see here. What else have we got? Grumbleback asks, coincidence that the Chaos Codex is coming out during the 8th month? I don't know. It should have come out during the 7th month as a Nurgle player myself, but that's a good question. I don't know. Let's see here. Lee Marone says, say hi to your wife, the ruthless silent death champ. During the Tabletop Minions Expo, a friend of ours, his name is Peter, I've known him for years, he ran a game called Silent Death, which is a space combat game from the 90s. And so that was like a big, and you could hop in or hop out. It was like just running like a good portion of the entire expo. And so Lee and my wife and a bunch of other people were playing, and my wife was doing well. So that's good to hear. Yeah. Josh McCarthy says, I went to buy the Redemptor Dreadnought yesterday, set it down to look at the new Primaris Centurions, got distracted and bought them by accident. So I ended up buying those and a Redemptor. Oh, well, there you go. See, that's how they get you. Is they trick you into buying more stuff by I don't know what that is, but shenanigans or jazz hands, I guess, one of the two. Frankie Lee Bailey says, I hate that the Primaris models are insanely hard to change poses with without breaking out the hobby knife and iron will. Well, the current Primaris are monopose, so I assume, and I don't know this for sure, but I assume that at some point they will release a box of Primaris that will be posable. Just like in the last starter set, you had those Dark Angels and you had the other guys, like the Chaos guys. They were all pretty monopose too. Like the Hellbrute that came in the last starter set, he only came with Multi-Melta and a weird claw thing, and he was in this weird pose, and that was it. And you couldn't really modify him very easily. But then later on, they came out with a Hellbrute kit that had all the different weapons in it, and it was much more posable and all that stuff. So that's what they're going to do here. I'm 98% sure. I'm very sure that soon they will come out with a box that will have a set of 5 or 10 Primaris in it, and they'll be posable, and you'll be able to do all kinds of cool stuff with them. So trying to pose the ones that came in the starter is difficult because they're designed to kind of go together one way. So I can see that. Aoki says, I might not be pronouncing that right. I'm a huge fan of Song of Blades and Heroes. Why is there so little support or fan base for such an extraordinarily customizable game? I think it's because it's, partially it's because it's a pretty small game. It's designed by predominantly one gentleman from Italy, who does good work, and he's made tons of different expansions for Song of Blades and Heroes. He's made an advanced Song of Blades and Heroes. He's actually had some successful Kickstarters. So I don't know that there's not any support, but there's not, it's a big portion of what you see in the industry is when you see a big company and they're kind of dominating the industry to some degree, it's sometimes due to time. Companies like Games Workshop have been around for 35 years or something. And then also it's marketing, which, you see companies like, Cool Mini or not, and, their new games come out and stuff like that. They go through a lot of stuff and they spend a bunch of money on marketing. They do, they do sponsorships for, for conventions. They do ads in some of the magazines. They do ads on websites. They have their own website. I mean, technically, I think Tabletop Gaming News is owned by Cool Mini. And so, they've got a platform there to be able to talk about stuff like that. So, Andrea from Italy does not have that kind of marketing budget and stuff like that. But the fact that's interesting is that in this day and age, he can still be successful-ish, as a single person and produce these games because we have the internet. I was able to find out about his games because of the internet, and I was able to buy his games because of the internet. If this was a pre-internet time, I would have never heard of it probably, because it would probably only be available in Italy. And it's just kind of difficult that way. So, he's only been doing this maybe 10 years. So that takes some time. And it also depends, getting a company started and getting big with it, like for him to be able to get to the size of something like Cool Mini or not, or whatever, takes a long time, Ask moderator Matt. He and Anton have been working on Hyacinth games and Wreckage for quite some time, and they've been successful. They've cranked out 120 plus different sculpts, and they've got quite a line of miniatures and everything like that. But they, it's not a huge company, and that's just the way it works. And sometimes that's okay. I don't know that Andrea wants to make it a huge company. Frankly, I think he wants to be able to. I'm friends with him on Facebook. I think he wants to be able to, do his gardening and things like that, and cook. But he also wants to be able to make games and keep producing his games, and he seems to be doing okay with it. So one thing that I like to do is I like to go to conventions and run Song of Blades and Heroes to teach people about it. It's one way I can help. So that's one of the things I like to do. Plus, it's also just a good game to teach people about tabletop wargaming in general. So if you're interested, that's a thing to do, and go from there. So start going to conventions and teaching people about the game, or go to your local shop and say, hey, now your local shop may kind of push back and go, well, we don't sell that game, so why are you going to be teaching people about it here? But you can say, well, because maybe then they're going to buy all those dumb Reaper bones you got hanging off of your shelf over there that nobody likes to ever buy because you don't tell them about it. Because you only tell them about Games Workshop, or you only tell them about the stuff from Cool Mini. You've got all those Reaper bones. If these people know that they could take those and put them into the game that I'm going to teach them about that only costs $8, well, maybe you'll sell more bones, and you'll sell more paint, and you'll sell more hobby supplies. If you have to push it that way, you could do it that way. What else have we got here? Have you ever thought about revisiting your wet palette video? Actually, I have, just recently. I was thinking about talking, like I showed you how to use or how to make one, and now I've thought about maybe making a video about how to use it, like how to mix things, like how to mix on the palette and things like that. Because I get questions from people asking me like, well, okay, now I've got the palette now, do I just put the paints on it and just, and so questions like that. So that might be something I might talk about. That being said, if you watch a bunch of the videos that Sam has done on the channel, he talks about wet palette to some degree in there, and that's why that secondary shot, that's not the shot of his face, that shot is usually a bit wider, so yeah, you can see the model, but you can frequently also see the wet palette, so you can see what he's doing and how he's mixing the paints and things like that down in the lower corner. So that's an idea as well. Oh, let me see. What else have we got? Grumbleback says, evangelize the game. Exactly. I did a video years ago now about becoming a gaming advocate. Like, if there's a game that you like, you know, let's say you really dig Malifaux, but nobody in your area plays it, then it behooves you, to some degree, to go out and you know, build 2 crews, which are not difficult because the crews are pretty small, usually 6 characters or less. Maybe some of them might go a little bit higher, but not much. So you build them, you paint them, whatever, and then you just start teaching people about it. You're like, hey, you want to learn how to play this game? I've got 2 forces and all the stuff, and I'll show you how to do it. You know, go to conventions, go to game stores that'll let you go and do demos there, that kind of stuff. Yeah. So that's the way to go with that. Greetings from Australia. Hello. The Primaris Marines seem to have less options than standard captains, librarians, and tacticals. Do you think they're going towards a simpler list building system similar to Warhammer Hordes? I don't know about that. I haven't gotten a chance to look at the new Codex because, like, the lists or the stuff in the index, the stuff in the Imperium 1 index that came out when they showed the Primaris Marines, you're right, there was nothing in the way of options. Basically, you got 5 guys, one of them was a sergeant, and that was the way it worked, you know. I have not gotten a chance yet to look at the new Codex, but I do know that now you have the option to make units of 10 Primaris, which you did not have the ability to with the index. So they have made some changes, but it'll be interesting to see what some of the other changes are. So that being said, I do wonder if they are going to try to kind of narrow that down. Age of Sigmar kind of pulled a bunch of that stuff out. You still have, like, relics and things that, like, you can add into your army, but the indexes stripped a lot of that out because I think they do want you to eventually buy the codexes. So one of the benefits of buying the codexes is that you're going to get, you know, more stuff, more toys. Again, it's mostly like special abilities, relics, from what I understand, those things. But like I said, I still haven't got a chance to look at the new Space Marine Codex, which I'm very interested to check out. But the Drop Podcast says, Wreckage minis are cool. That's true. They are. Actually, the plan right now is... so there's a convention in Oshkosh, where I live, that's coming up in late October. It's like the 21st and 22nd or something like that. It's a convention. It's not a miniatures convention, but miniatures are there. It's an overall tabletop gaming convention called the Northeastern Wisconsin Gamapalooza, which is a very long title, otherwise known as New Game, but it's NEW Gamapalooza. The plan is that moderator Matt and Anton are going to come up and have a table at this convention. I'm going to have a table at the convention. Matt and I both had, we had our tables next to each other last year at this same convention, but we're going to do that again. But the plan is that maybe Matt and Anton come up a day early, like on Friday, and we do some Wreckage Bat Rep stuff for the channel at that point. So Matt and I have been talking about that a little bit here and there, so that's what we're kind of hoping to be able to do. I'm going to have other bat reps probably before that. Like, I'm hoping to have a bat rep right after or close after GenCon. That'll be the first one that goes up. I haven't decided exactly which game yet it's going to be, but I've got some options. But we do want to do like a nice Wreckage one or a couple of them just before this convention in October, just because then it saves a trip, So we'll see how that goes. And then I'll be able to show off my current Wreckage models. Maybe I'll do another set. Maybe I'll do some drifters too. I've got Stakers finished. You've seen them on the channel before, but yeah. Let's see. Oh, Matthew has put a link in there to newgamapalooza.com. So there's the information. They've just, like I said, they just released the new dates just recently. I got an email about it. So let's see. A little bit more on the info on the Gundam markers. This is talking about being able to use markers instead of paint on models. The ink is hard to control, making painting large surfaces difficult. They work best for small details and highlights. Well, from what I understand, and I'm not a Gundam guy, but from what I understand with Gundams, the kits are normally designed so that the plastic is pre-colored. So, like, like the panels for the legs are white, but the panels for the feet parts are more gray, and then this part is more blue, and this part's more red. And then you put them together, and they're all pre-colored. But the idea really behind the Gundams, from what I understand, is to do all the weathering and stuff like that to make it look more real and less plasticky. So I can understand why there would be Gundam markers for doing details and things like that. I've watched a couple of videos. There's a guy named Dr. Faust on YouTube, and he did some Gundam models. And I did not know that the majority of it was not actually painted. It was actually just colored molded plastic, and then it was all about weathering it to make it look more real. I thought that was an interesting way to do it, but you can do it with those bigger models because they're like 10 inches or a foot tall, so it makes more sense. Rob Phillipson says, have you been playing the Fate of Connor campaign? That's a big global campaign they're doing for 40K. I have not, no. I may be able to do it. I'm not sure. The local store that I like to go to is technically not a Games Workshop, retailer. They get their Games Workshop stuff from a distributor that's not Games Workshop, due to reasons. So I don't know if we can play there or not. I'll have to look it up. But there's a place up in Appleton that I like to go to as well. So maybe I'll go and play some games there, and then be able to put them into the big worldwide campaign or whatever, and see how that goes. Maybe win some. I don't know. The problem is I'm going to just basically lose some fights for chaos. So I don't know if you guys want me playing or not. It's hard to say. Can I turn a Grey Knight Dread Knight into a Dark Angel? I mean, if you want to, certainly. You can do whatever you want. I don't know how you would do it because it looks very Grey Knight-ish because it's got all that engraved little tiny words and stuff like that the Grey Knights have in all their armor, with all the different campaigns and things that they've been on, I guess. So I don't know how you would do it. And as far as like if you were to take it to a tournament, I don't know that it would be super legal. I don't know how they would like that necessarily, but we'll see how it goes. It's hard to say. Alrighty. I occasionally get hold of markers and soak the felt insert in dyes for use on leather. Oh, that's an interesting kind of way to go. Interesting. Huh. What else have we got? I once was in a Gundam workshop, and they mostly used the markers to mask where the plastic got white from cutting it from the sprues. Oh, I could see that too, yeah. Because that's the thing, even with colored plastic, dyed plastic, or plastic that the color of the plastic itself is a certain color. As you cut it off from the sprues, it's going to cause a little bit of stress, which will then generally, like when you're cutting your gray models off of the gray sprues, you'll notice sometimes that where you cut, that stress kind of fracture turns a little white. So it's kind of the same type of thing. So I could see that makes sense. There was a guy, I'm going to talk in a bit about this event that I went to yesterday, and there was a guy who was there who was not a gamer at all, but he was just more of a modeler. He loved to make little dioramas and all kinds of crazy stuff. And he had this really fun kind of skeleton, kind of pirate diorama that he brought to show. But it was just really interesting there's a lot of people out there who just love scale modeling and do that kind of stuff. They just love making dioramas and they do all that kind of stuff. And I can get behind that to some degree, but I still do enjoy gaming as well. I would say I enjoy painting maybe twice as much as I enjoy gaming, but I still do really enjoy gaming. I just don't really find myself to be competitive about it. I just like having a good time with it. So there's that. But I don't know. Someday I do have an idea for a display piece, which is basically kind of a scale modeling thing idea. I do have an idea for a small little display piece I want to do one of these days, but I've got a lot of other projects to get out of the way first, so that's where that's at. Let me see here. What else have we got? Any retailer should be able to buy a packet for Cronor and then be able to report the results to the site. It's not a GW store only thing, but the local ones have to sign up and buy the kit to do so. Well, I'll talk to my friend who runs the store and see if he can. If not, like I said, I know that the Appleton store, they're a direct retailer for Games Workshop as well as many other things, and so I should be able to maybe do some stuff there. Ready to Roll says, my parents got a new kitchen table, so I took their old one and made it into my dedicated painting table. Productivity is better when you don't have to keep moving your setup. Absolutely. I did a video some time ago about having a dedicated hobby area and how much that can help, because there's a lot of people who, I'm lucky enough to live in a part of the country that has basements. Like most every house around here has got a basement. So it's nice to be able to go down to the basement and paint. Some people have like an extra room that they use maybe like as their computer room, where maybe they play video games or whatever, but then they also have on the other side of the room, you know, like a table and like a light and the whole deal and all their paints and stuff like that. But having that as opposed to setting up, painting on the dining room table for a while, and then having to put it all away, it makes it more difficult. It just takes more time to get painting done because there's all the setup and takedown. So yeah, being able to find, even if it's a small corner or someplace you can just work, you know, we don't generally, if we're smart, we don't need a lot of space. I have a tendency to use a lot of space, but we don't need to use a lot of space. I do though. So yeah, no, that is really, really super helpful. Let's see here. What's the deal between Forge World and Games Workshop? Well, from what I understand, Forge World is owned by Games Workshop, but they are technically kind of a separate company, sort of, separate-ish. And so, yeah, they, like, the models that they make are predominantly all resin, and they're more for advanced modelers, which means that very frequently the resin is sometimes crooked. Like if you've ever tried to build like a big vehicle for from them, like a lot of their models, like if they sell like a small, you know, resin model, they're lovely, don't get me wrong, but I've had friends who have built some of the larger, you know, vehicles from Forge World, and it's difficult to keep a big piece of resin straight in manufacture. They will, you know, warp a bit, especially if you're shipping them over from the UK or whatever. So you have to take that into consideration when you're building that stuff. It can be for advanced modelers. That it's become a bit of a joke around my group of friends that anytime you're trying to put something together, whether it's from Forge World or from anybody, if it doesn't go together very easily, or if there's some sort of problem or just whatever, we always just say, well, you know, it is for advanced modelers. Anyway. The Forge World stuff is generally gorgeous, but it's also, you know, it's a premium price. It's a premium product. But yeah, and it's not, as far as within the game, it used to be that, like the Forge World stuff, you had to get your opponent, obviously, to agree to it and go, yeah, you go, okay, fine, we can play with that. Because there are rules for it, but it's not in the normal Codex books. It's usually kind of separate documents. They've tried to kind of integrate those things a little bit more in Age of Sigmar. You know, like the Age of Sigmar app that has all the War Scrolls. You can find pretty much all the War Scrolls for the stuff, the you know, Forge World stuff as well. But you can also find, you know, you're starting to find that a little bit sometimes with 40K. If you're going to a tournament, the tournament organizer will either say yay or nay about whether or not you can bring Forge World stuff. It's a whole thing. I only own a little tiny bit of Forge World stuff, and it's usually just like add-on pieces. It's not like whole models. It's like, oh, these, you know, special rhino doors that make this particular rhino now look like it's more, you know, Black Templar or whatever. I've bought a lot of pieces that way, but I do think I have a Nurgle sorcerer somewhere in the basement that I just haven't built yet, but he's a straight Forge World model. I don't know what I'm going to do with him, but he looks cool. But yeah, the only Forge World stuff I've ever bought has predominantly been accessories and add-on pieces and things like that. So I've certainly never bought like one of those big Titans or anything. They're crazy. Uncle Adam, thanks to your videos, I started to paint consistently. I started with a Necron squad, then a Space Wolves tactical squad, and my third was a Terminator team that I recently posted on Facebook. Well, that's great to hear, Ricardo. Yeah, I mean, I've just found as I've gotten older that you just need to just take the time. You need to kind of focus on, you know, I want to get this done by this date, and so I need to spend at least 2 nights a week on it, or maybe 3 nights a week on it, or maybe you can only spend a half hour a day on it, or whatever, you know, whatever works best for you and your schedule. That's just the way to get things done. I was having a conversation with a friend of mine, Josh, recently about how neither of us watch television anymore because we both keep ourselves busy with all kinds of projects. He's working with a friend, and they're cranking out all this 3D printed terrain, and then Josh does all the painting on it. Plus, Josh is also doing a bunch of commission paint work now. So he's like, I don't have time to watch TV, and I frankly don't care to, because there's just a bunch of garbage on for the most part. And I'm like, I'm the same way. In most nights, you know, my wife and I get home from work, we eat dinner, and then, you know, I go down to the basement and paint, and she knits and watches some things sometimes, or she reads and stuff like that. And it's just, I don't know. I'm not finding a ton of value anymore from straight regular television. I use the television a lot, but I'm predominantly watching YouTube on it, or movies, stuff like that. So definitely, yeah. Let me see here. I just saw that Matthew mentioned that Gaddis... Oh, yes, Gaddis Gaming. Just picked up the new Primaris releases. Very easy to build. Hi, Gaddis. How are you guys doing? Yeah, I've also heard that those new models are kind of cool, too. I know there's a set of 3 Death Guard that are, like, easy to put together. You know, it's a little set where you just, like, kind of, they go together kind of like the ones in the starter box, but they're different sculpts. They're not the sculpts from the starter box. They're completely different sculpts. So I kind of want those just because I'm like, well, that's kind of interesting. Plus, I've heard that one of them has a Blight Launcher, which Blight Launchers were put into the new Death Guard stuff, and I don't know what they look like. Like, there was no Blight Launcher in the starter box, the Dark Imperium. So evidently one of them is carrying a Blight Launcher, so I want to at least know what it looks like. So if I have to try to fake one or model one or whatever, I can at least get close. Because there was no picture, you know. Zombie Boy asks, hey, Adam, how many Armageddon teams do you have right now? I found Chaos Space Marines and Grey Knights are good fun. I have a Chaos Space Marine list, which is like 3 or 4 Marines, and the rest are cultists. And they're painted and done, but that's just because they were painted and done for... Well, I did add the cultists. Those cultists were not, that I've been putting in that list, are newer paints, but the rest of the Plague Marines that are basically acting as my Space Marines, they've been in there for a while. Got some cicadas outside. What else? I've got a list of Imperial Guard, which are just about ready to be painted. They're all primed and base coated. And then I've got a trader list of Imperial Guard, which are basically Imperial Guard, but with Beastman heads. And they're all built, and I think their bases are textured. Maybe they're not. They're further away. And then I want to do a Necron list, because I've got a bunch of warriors all painted and done, but I need to add a bunch of Immortals to it, and I haven't built them. I own them, but I haven't built them. I technically then also have a box of Grey Knights that I would like to try out, because the Grey Knights army for Shadow War Armageddon, you can only have a maximum of 5 models anyway. So, you know, a box of 5 works perfectly. So, and then I can also take those guys and then also put them into my Imperium army once in a while if I just want to have an extra squad. We were talking yesterday about, a friend of mine used the term Imperium Soup. Because, you know, the way that 40K works now is that technically, if you want to, they all have the Imperium keyword, all these Imperium guys. So you could have some Blood Angels and some, you know, Space Wolves and some Imperial Guard and some Inquisitors, all those guys in your same detachment, and it's fine because they all have the Imperium keyword. And he was referring to it as Imperium Soup. I personally think it's cool. That's the way I play Age of Sigmar. I don't have any faction pure or keyword pure lists. My lists are like, oh, it's chaos, so there's Skaven, and there's Beastmen, and there's Nurgle guys, and, you know, I'll throw in some Khorne guys if I have to, or whatever, and I just like mixing those guys up. I think it's a lot of fun. Lionel Johnson says, it does have a Blight Launcher. I have it. Yeah, see, I want to get one of those sets, the sets soon. I just haven't picked it up yet. I just want to really see what it kind of does. The Blight Launcher is basically just the grenade launcher thing from Horus Heresy. I'll have to take a look at that. I'm hoping to see some pictures of it, like close-up pictures soon. That'd be good, too. Cicadas are tiny Tyranids. Ooh, I hadn't thought of that, but I think you're right. It's a good point. Let me see here. Joshua says those 3 Death Guard models are indeed new sculpts. They grow the 7-man unit in the starter box to a 10-man unit, adding the launcher and a champion with a power fist and a plasma gun. Yeah, that kind of sounds nice, actually. I think that wouldn't be a bad thing. I have not started working on any, other than the bloat drone, I have not started, which if you've looked on, I posted my painted bloat drone on the Facebook, the Tabletop Minions Paint Showcase Club on Facebook. I posted pictures of my bloat drone just recently. I don't know, Thursday night maybe, and or Wednesday. I forget when. But yeah, take a look at that. That's the first piece I've painted actually from the starter box. I haven't painted any of the other Death Guard yet because I've just been using my older Plague Marines as Death Guard, and they work out pretty well. But I am looking forward to painting the troops in that box. I'm not sure if I'm going to paint any of the HQ units in that box anytime soon because, like I've said in the past, when you compare Typhus to the Lord of Contagion, Typhus is he's got a lot more things going on. He's a better model. He's got more skills. He's a psyker, all that stuff, and he's cheaper. So that's why I painted up Typhus, and you'll be seeing that picture very soon too in the Paint Showcase Club. Bloodthirst. What would be an efficient technique for green stuff? That's vague, frankly. I'll just tell you to keep your fingers and your tools wet. I'll just say that. Because green stuff will stick to you. It is, I believe, technically an epoxy putty or a form of epoxy putty. So it'll stick to all kinds of things, which is kind of the point. But make sure you keep your fingers wet when you're sculpting it. Make sure you keep the tools that you're using to sculpt it wet. That's probably the most efficient thing to do as far as green stuff. As far as like what to model, it totally depends on what you're putting the green stuff on, really. And I'm not a great green stuff sculptor. I'm not great at saying it either. Any tips to help my paint jobs not suck? My biggest problem with painting is that I'm not very good at it and not understanding color. Well, let's see. That's a good question. Number one is thin your paints, which I'm sure you've heard all over the internet. Our friend Duncan, the painting man from Games Workshop, always tells you to thin your paints. I will tell you to thin your paints. Sam will tell you to thin your paints. Pretty much everyone will tell you to thin your paints. The wet palette is your friend for that. So watch the wet palette video on this channel about how to make a wet palette out of just like a little, Tupperware sandwich thing and some baking parchment and some paper towel and water. And that'll help you to thin your paints more effectively. And they'll stay wetter longer, which is also really the big deal there. So that's number one. Go slow, practice. If you have to practice on plastic army men that you buy from the toy store, you can get a whole bag of them for super cheap, prime them up real quick out in the driveway or whatever, let them dry, and then just do some practice on them, before you start painting. If you're concerned about, ruining your current models, which some people are, I look at it as like, well, if I don't like the paint job, I can usually strip them, and then just start over. So that's not too bad. But it's also a good idea to practice by just painting on, plastic army men that maybe you get off of, I don't know, I see them at the grocery store. There's a lot of different places. But you want to prime them, obviously. You could also practice on Reaper Bones if you want to. Those are pretty cheap. There's a lot of different options out there. WizKids now has got a line of unpainted, like fantasy models, but they're already pre-primed. And those are really nice too. So yeah, definitely. It takes work. It's not a quick thing, but if you follow a lot of techniques and watch a lot of videos online, frankly, especially if they're aimed towards beginner stuff, don't don't start right away with like wet blending. Like start with just simple concepts. I do want to make a series of videos about the simplest of concepts and just really lay it out and go, I did a video a long time ago, about rattle can tricks. If you do a search for rattle can tricks on YouTube, you'll probably find it. And that really helps because you're able to, I've done this myself tons of times, which is why I made the video about it. You're spraying a color and using that basically as your primer. There are lots of colored primers out there. Army Painter is a big one that makes lots of colored primers. I think even GW makes spray primers. But you're spraying, let's say you're painting Blood Angels. So they need to be red. So you start with a dark red that's a primer and it's also your base color. Then you use a lighter red spray can after that kind of dries, and you spray just from above. Then it's kind of like the light is hitting the top of the person, and then it's the lighter color is the light, and then the darker color underneath the arms and all that kind of stuff is the shadow. And now all of a sudden you've got a guy that looks almost like he was airbrushed, and he looks like he's got gradients of color. And now you just go in and start throw on a wash maybe to kind of bring out some detail, maybe do some that kind of stuff. I've got a video about how to paint skeletons. There's a lot of concepts in that. It's a longer video. It's about a half an hour. There's a lot of information in that video too that can be helpful for newer painters, because it's showing a very simple, quick way to paint skeletons, and a lot of those same techniques are very usable across a lot of different types of characters. I'm about to do a video soon, hopefully, about how to quick paint Imperial Guard. They're the Imperial Guard that I'll be using for my Shadow War Armageddon team, and they're currently downstairs. They're actually even all stuck to paint sticks, ready to go. And I just haven't had the time, so I've been making other videos. But yeah, definitely take a look at that stuff. Drop Podcast says, I'm off to table building. Have a great weekend, Minions. Good stream as usual. Adam, happy wargaming all. Hopefully we will be streaming Bat Rep soon. Excellent. Good to see you guys here. Yeah, Bat Reps. Bat Reps. What else have we got? GW paints are self-thickening. Technically, most paints are self-thickening. I think sometimes the GW paint pots add to that more than others. So there's that. I get that. But I've got plenty of even like older Vallejo paints, which, you know, are like pretty thick in the bottle. So I need to sometimes drop in some more. And it's harder, frankly, with dropper bottles to get to like add a little bit more liquid or add a little bit more thinner to them or something like that to kind of refresh them. You have to usually kind of work that nozzle part off so you can get into the dropper bottle. Do not try putting like flow aid into the tiny little hole on the top of the nozzle. That doesn't work. You have to try to work the nozzle off to get stuff in there. It's not usually super hard, but it's a little difficult, especially if there's like the paint like caked on it. That's problematic. Just left a catering job, so first time I've been able to catch one of these live for the whole thing in a while. Cleaning off a very neglected hobby desk in anticipation of next weekend. Well, good. Glad to hear you got to see the show live. What else have we got? I have an issue of over-thinning my paints with the wet palette. Did I make a wet palette from your video? I did make a wet palette from your video. Any remedies? Well, I would tell you to add a little bit less water to it then, if you're over-thinning it. Man, sometimes I think it's very difficult, frankly, to over-thin. You know, it will take you longer to paint, but you'll have much smoother layers and transitions if you're getting to that point. But what I normally do, and it's going to be very difficult for me to simulate this, but normally, like on the palette, I'll put a little blob of paint, and then I will sometimes, then I clean off my brush in the water, and then I get a bunch of water on my brush, and then I put like a dollop of water next to the paint, not directly in it, but like next to it. And then that's the whole trick about the wet palette, and it takes up more space, which is why sometimes some people like bigger wet palettes, but it's not a complete necessity. But then you can just take your brush into the water and grab a little bit of water and bring it over to the paint and or you can bring a little bit of paint. If you bring a little bit of the paint over to the water, you're generally going to make all of the water turn whatever color, purple or whatever, whatever color paint you're working with. But if you just grab a little bit of the water, bring it over and sort of scooch it around and you're sort of mixing, then, if you've over-thinned because you grabbed way too much water and dragged it over, let's say, you could then go and grab a little bit of paint and bring it over. So it takes a little bit of work and it takes a little bit of practice, but in the past what I used to do is take my paint and blob it onto a piece of plastic, or a piece of tile or something like that for my palette. And then you put some water in there and you swish it around and do that stuff. And that works just as well, except that in about a minute, then it's usually dry. Like where you've thinned the paint, like the glob of paint is still not dry, but where you've added some water to it and squished it around to get it a nice thin consistency, that piece dries up in about a minute. So then you have to do more and it's a pain. Whereas with the wet palette, because it's basically sitting on a moistened piece of baking parchment, you can really let it it'll sit longer and it'll be wet longer and it won't dry out so quickly, and that's really the benefit of the wet palette. It's not for everybody. There obviously, what's his name there, Duncan from GW, he doesn't seem to use a wet palette when he's teaching painting. He uses a palette paper, but he's just doing it dry on a dry piece of paper. I've watched other painters who also don't use wet palettes. They just don't like them. But that, everybody, if you watched the video I did after this year's Adepticon, where I talked to all the different painters and asked them all the same questions and got so many different answers, obviously everybody's got their own way to do it. It's best for you to find your way to do it. But if you're curious, start asking some other people, and maybe they, watch videos like that, watch videos like these, find out some stuff, and then see what you like, see what works best for you. That's my best answer, sadly. Hey, Uncle Adam, this is related. I'm new to the hobby, and your videos are very helpful. Should I use flow aid and a wet palette? I know Sam uses flow aid on a wet palette, I believe, or else he used drying retarder, one of the two. If you go back and look at some of his videos, he usually likes to talk about it too, whether he's using flow aid or drying retarder. And I don't know, maybe they're the same thing. I don't know a ton about them, actually. But I know it can help. He uses like a little bit of that stuff in his videos. So take a look at that. Do you have any tips on starting your YouTube wargaming channel? asks Peter. My friend and I have started one, and we want to try and get a larger audience. Consistency is key. Absolutely. I did this for 2.5 years. I started in March of 2013, and I put out videos on on the regular, and by on the regular I meant sometimes 2 weeks in between, sometimes 3 weeks, sometimes 4 weeks. So they weren't very regular at all. I was regularly irregular. Let's just say that. I was all over the board, and nobody knew when the videos were coming out, and more importantly, YouTube didn't know when the videos were coming out, and that's kind of a thing. And it's just hard to depend on, content when you're like, oh, he hasn't put it out for 6 weeks, and that would happen. So with the quality that I had and the stuff like that, that was a bonus, but the irregularity of my content was a negative, and so it took me 2.5 years to get to 10,000 subscribers, and that was in September of 2015, roughly. In October of 2015, I decided, what I should do is I should start putting out videos on the same day at the same time every week. So I did, and I started that in mid-October of 2015. I put out a video on a Friday, and then I put out a video at the same time the next Friday, and I put out a video at the same time the next Friday, and I haven't missed a Friday since mid-October 2015 when I decided to start doing it that way. And that consistency really, really, really helps. It helps me as a creator to understand this is when I got to get it done, and sometimes Christmas is on a Friday, sometimes New Year's is on a Friday. That's happened since I've started this. So you just have to plan ahead and go, okay, well, I'm going to film stuff on Tuesday and then upload it. Because that's the thing that's nice is you can upload stuff and put it in and then tell it, don't launch this until this time at this date. And that's actually the better idea. That's a trick I just learned recently. If you have a lot of followers, specifically, if you put up a video and just immediately make it live, a lot of your followers will get the notification, oh, hey, this new video went up. And this is not live videos, this is pre-recorded stuff. They'll get a notification, hey, this video went up, and they'll go to watch it, and it won't be done processing completely yet. So like the 360p or the 480p version are probably processed and ready to go, but like the high def, like the 720 or the 1080p, aren't completely finished yet. So they'll only see the low res, and they'll be like, oh, that looks like crap. So if you upload it, but then at least tell it to wait at least an hour, then it will have the time, YouTube will have the time to process the video and to get all the different versions of all the different, high res and all that stuff finished, and then you're better off. So, oops, that's just a little tip. But really, it's consistency. Consistency is the key. Me putting up a video every Friday and telling people, like if you look at on the channel, in the main channel page for Tabletop Minions, I've got the little banner graphic across the top, and I say, new wargaming videos every single Friday, so people come to expect it, and that helps. And as you're more consistent, the algorithm for YouTube, it just makes when it sees that you're being more consistent, it takes you more seriously, and it ranks you up. So when you're watching a video, and there's those videos over on this side of the screen, there's those videos over there, those are suggested videos. It'll put you into the suggested videos or rank you higher in the suggested videos because you seem to be more serious about it, because you're being more regular. You're putting up the videos the same time, same day, every week. That's the best piece of advice. As far as growing the channel, there's tons of other pieces of advice that I could go into about types of subject matter and all that kind of jazz. But I do keep kicking around the idea of making some sort of, I don't know. I've thought about making some sort of course or something like that. I did do a seminar at 2016. I did 2 seminars 2016 at Adepticon about YouTube. And I'm in talks right now with the guys from the Las Vegas Open, where I will probably be doing seminars at the Las Vegas Open this upcoming year in January about, again, YouTube. So if any of you guys are going to be at the Las Vegas Open in whenever it is in January, late January, I think, then hopefully maybe you'll be able to come into the class and I'll be able to teach you some stuff there. So we'll see how it goes. Matthew Sears says, and now he is famous. Indeed. Super duper duper famous. Um, let me see here. What else we got? Uncle Adam, watched your airbrush videos, and this brought me to buy an airbrush setup. Can we expect more videos on that topic? Probably. I mean, it was kind of a beginner series, so we'll see. But I do want to do a video about like the actual. You know how you look at stuff and you go, well, that looks airbrushed. Some people like that look. So I want to hopefully maybe teach people how to make that look. But frankly, I don't like my airbrush stuff to look airbrushed. You know what I mean? Like there's some people that will do airbrush stuff and you're like, wow, you really just airbrush the hell out of that. Like it just, I don't know, it like everything has got a gradient. Oh, this antenna's got a gradient and this thing, and everything's just this crazy gradient. And sometimes you kind of go overboard. And I can sort of show you somewhat how to do that, but generally I like my stuff to look, I like to airbrush it, but not make it look too airbrushed. That's me. So let me see here. What else have we got? Jared asks, Uncle Adam, I've always lived in places that have very few people involved in the hobby, but since I found your channel, I've been able to keep a love for the hobby. Thank you so much. Well, that's great. I'm glad to hear it. So yeah, I mean, it's difficult, you know, that's one of the downsides of the hobby is that sometimes it's difficult to find other people in it. I'm working on that. I'm working on that with my day job and an app, but it's taken some time. So yeah. What else have we got? Six Gunner says, I have a problem. Too many games and so little time. I just talked recently about that. About can you have too many hobbies? And the answer is yes. So, you know, that's, again, it depends on what you want to make time for, frankly. I've cut out, like I said, I've cut out television for the most part, and I'm happier for it, frankly. And it gives me more time for hobbying and painting and making videos and stuff, which are my main hobbies. I think I said in that video that if I had more time, like if every day was 72 hours instead of 24 or whatever, I would probably get into kind of drone racing because I think that's really fascinating. I love seeing that stuff and like the engineering behind it and some of the I don't want to say cutting edge, but some of the cutting edge technology and things like that. I think that's really interesting, but I just don't have time for it. So so I don't do it. That's how it works. Let me see here. Oh my goodness. What else have we got? Oh, I screwed up the chat. Hang on. Someone asked if anyone else needs a fresh beer. I'm not quite sure how that's going to work. Uncle Adam, I'm kind of insistent. No, I read that one already. What else have we got? It's got to be high noon somewhere. That's probably true. It's very true. Bloodthirst asks, are there any scenarios where overpainting a model is a good thing? Gosh, overpainting. Do you mean just painting over like a model that you don't want to like strip? Or do you mean just putting too much paint on the model? Because I don't know that it's ever a good idea to put too much paint on a model. It fills in detail, and you really want your models to not look painted. You want them to look as if they're supposed to be that color. Like that's just the color they are. That's always the thing that you sort of strive for. At least that's what I strive for. Is I want the color. I want the model to look like it just was that color. I don't want to have someone look at it and go, "Oh, I can see where the paint, was applied because there's brush strokes, or or it filled in all this guy's chainmail on his loincloth or whatever." It's not one of those. You want it to be. You want it to be one of those situations where it's just a very, almost seamless kind of thing. So overpainting that way, no, I don't think that's good. If you're talking about just painting over an old paint job and just starting over, as long as that original paint job wasn't too chunky, then I don't think that that's terrible. If it's an elfin princess and she's supposed to be very, very smooth and ethereal and whatnot, that's going to be tough. Like I have overpainted. I have painted over the top of used Nurgle models that I've bought before because I'm like, they're Nurgle. They're supposed to be chunky and gross and weird. So why not? Years ago, I did a video about personality, like how to personalize your minis, and kind of you've given them names. I've got Uncle Tickles and all this kind of stuff. Well, there's one Nurgle model that I bought at Adepticon, like used, and it was just painted horrifically, and it was so thick. And I was like, I'm just going to paint over it. And that's Dirty Dick, who if you go back and watch that video, that's his name, because he is just like textured. He's got so much paint on him. But I painted over the top of it, and because he's Nurgle, it looks fine. If he was supposed to be something else, if he was supposed to be a normal Space Marine, you'd be like, what is wrong with that Space Marine? I think he's got mange. But that wasn't the case. He's Nurgle, so you're like, oh, I think he has mange. Because he's Nurgle, it's fine. Dorky Dad asks, or, well, states, really, Meeples and Miniatures podcast, which I believe I've listened to once in a while, is often mentioning the dilution of the hobby regarding too many games and the more hoarding aspects of our hobby. Obviously, there's hoarding that happens in miniatures. I see a lot of it in board gaming, too. To be fair, technically all tabletop gaming has got there's a definite taint of hoarding that goes on in pretty much all four of the genres. We obviously see it in miniatures. We see hoarding in, I mean, I've got a ton of stuff in my basement that's unpainted. Tons and tons and tons and tons of stuff. And I've done a video about that in the past. But board gamers love to buy a board game, drop 60, 70, 80 bucks on a board game, play it twice. But then it sits in their basement on a shelf, and it just, look at all the cool board games I have. But will you ever play it again? Hard to say. I've talked to plenty of board gaming friends who have this exact same concern. Then there's also CCGs, your Magic, your Yu-Gi-Oh, your Pokemon, or whatever. I mean, that game can be very much all about storage, like all these big white cardboard boxes filled with all the little rows of cards, or the binders full of cards and all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of that going on there. And then in RPGs, well, I don't want to ever throw away a book, even though it's an old version, because there might be a cool story in there that I can use as a dungeon master or a GM or whatever, and and the book's only this thin, so I'll just put it on the shelf with all the other 200 books that I've got. So yeah, every aspect to some degree of our hobby does have that danger of hoarding. Partially one of the reasons why I'm very interested in buying the Space Marine Codex in digital format, because I don't have to worry about storing it. But yeah, we'll see how it goes. Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. There is there can be, it's what they call shiny syndrome, where you're like, oh, this is new and this came out. Oh, this is really cool. Oh, this is really cool. And then, well, what are you going to play? You got 8 different games. So it is hard. It's difficult. I do try to narrow things down a little bit myself, but it's difficult, especially with the channel, because people are asking about all kinds of different games. And so at the very least, I like to keep abreast of stuff. I love to do demos of games. I watched at this thing yesterday, which I guess I should start talking about at some point. At this thing yesterday, I watched some guys play Blood and Plunder. So that was a lot of fun. But yeah, so here's the deal. So yesterday I went to Wausau, Wisconsin, which is about 2.5, almost, no, not 2.5, I'm sorry. An hour and a half, almost 2 hours north of here. And it's to this small event that was run by a guy that I know. He has a YouTube channel as well. He goes by Wisco Horndog, I believe. He does a lot of videos about Saga. If you just do a search on YouTube about Saga miniatures or whatever, you'll probably eventually come across a video from the channel called Wisco Horndog. His name is Raj. And he also is one of the guys that runs that event that I went to back in January called Wapaka. It's like the orc Wa, but it's Wapaka, and it's in Wapaka, Wisconsin. This is in Wausau, Wisconsin, which is a whole different thing. Anyway, so Wapaka is like 150 people, and it's open kind of to the public and whatever, and so it's a miniatures convention. The thing that I went to, that I was invited to yesterday, that was more of it's a much smaller event. It's like maybe 25 people. And he ran an Infinity narrative campaign that was, I think, 3 games. I didn't play in that, but I had some friends that played in it. And then that's where I played my 40K game, because I was going on another corner. There were other people who were playing the Batman game. If you look at this thing here, the title screen from today, this is a picture from one of the Batman games. Like these 2 henchmen, I believe, are henchmen for the Joker. If I believe that's correct. And then that building in the background was built by a guy that I know named Chris Broska, who used to be on a podcast called Skull Bros Awesome. And they used to do a podcast predominantly about fantasy. They quit last year. But yeah, it's really cool. I'm going to eventually do more pictures of this when I talk about the thing in a video, but this was really cool terrain that he built. And it was just cool to see someone running like a different game. They're running this Batman game, which I know very little about, but I got to watch a bunch of that. Blood and Plunder. What else was there? Saga. There was guys playing Saga. There was a big board that was Saga. I've got some pictures of that too. I didn't get a chance, because I didn't get back home last night till nearly midnight. So I didn't really get a chance to like get a bunch of pictures together that I could show them to you here. But I will probably eventually make a video about not just that event. What I want to do is I want to make a video about kind of how to host your own smaller private event. Not a big thing, not like Tabletop Minions Expo, which isn't that big yet, or not a thing like Adepticon or anything along those lines. Not even a thing like that WAPACA, because that's 150 people. But, and even, to be fair, not even necessarily a thing as big as this thing that I went to yesterday, which was about 25 people. But how to kind of host a gaming event, maybe like in your basement amongst you and your 5 friends, you know, that kind of stuff, and how to kind of go about that and little things. So I'm going to make a video about that soon. So some of those images will show up in there. But it was really interesting. I talked to a lot of people. I talked to a couple of guys who were really, really good at terrain. I mean, besides that picture that I just showed you there, there was another guy who was really had amazing looking terrain. They were playing Age of Sigmar on it at one point. Just big, really cool rolling hills, lots of cool trees. He made a bunch of trees out of like cool copper wire, and then, you know, it worked out really well. It was really interesting. So I don't know. I really enjoyed going and playing. Like I said, I only played like one game of 40K against this guy named Matt, and then I just watched a bunch of other games and just talked to a lot of people and saw a lot of cool things. So it was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it. I like going to little events like that. They're a lot of fun. And hopefully I'm going to make a video eventually soon about kind of how you can do those things and put those together. Let me see here. Burnseye says, "Hey Adam, I took some advice from one of your excellent videos, and I'm currently sat here pressing on every 3 minutes on my brand new ultrasonic cleaner." Yeah, ultrasonic cleaners are great for stripping models and stuff like that. I do wish that most of them didn't have only a 3-minute timer. But I think what they're originally designed for the most part, is for cleaning like jewelry and stuff like that. And I guess you don't need more than 3 minutes to clean jewelry, but it would be nice to clean, models. And if you could just make the thing just run for 6 or 7 minutes. Potentially, I guess I hadn't thought of this, maybe the motors can't handle running more than 3 minutes at a clip. That could be. I don't know what makes the ultrasonic happen. Something's got to happen on the inside. It's probably not a motor per se, but there's some sort of device in there that makes it vibrate at ultrasonic frequencies. And so maybe that thing can only run for 3 minutes before it has to stop. I don't know. But yeah, they're really helpful. I use one for cleaning my airbrush, which is why my airbrush is always squeaky clean, and I do use one for stripping models. Although I haven't done a lot of model stripping lately because I've stripped all the models I need right now. I mean, they're all stripped, so there's that. Let me see here. Douglas Hooker says, "I like Roger's Saga stuff. Really helped me to keep interest going in Saga at my local gaming group." Yeah. The Raj I was talking about, Wisco Horndog, he's done he does a video I think every Thursday, which he calls Saga Thursday. Yeah, and he does a lot of he does videos that way about Saga. Saga is an interesting game to me, but well, not so interesting. I'm going to get into it, but I do like to look at it. I look at and I've read about it a bit. I like to look at the models a lot. I like to look at the cool terrain. You know, when you go to Adepticon and you see the Saga room, which is growing, by the way, the tables that they're putting together are really, really nice. It's just amazing looking. I mean, it's almost like you're playing in a diorama in some fashion. So definitely. Joshua Flores says, "Hi Adam, I've recently been getting into Malifaux and I really want to start a small community here in my country. I realized there was one a few years back, but it hasn't been active. What to do?" Well, what I would tell you to do is to, like I said in the past, I would try to build at least two crews, and then if you've got a local store or whatever, you know, just ask the owner and stuff, "Hey, is it cool if I start teaching people how to play this here?" Because the upside for the owner is that, well, if I can order some of this Malifaux guy and this guy who wants more opponents starts teaching people about it, they might start buying the stuff from me if I've got it here in the store potentially or whatever, or they might just at the very least to start special order it. I can get it with my normal, you know, order from whatever distributor. And you know, store owners want to make money so that they can eat. That's the way it works. They're not evil jerks trying to steal your money. They just want to survive and eat and feed their families or whatever. So if you want to find, it's kind of a mutually beneficial sort of situation. You want to find more people and build a community and find more people to play the game that you enjoy. Find more people to play against, and they want to be able to sell the product. So that's kind of a benefit. If you don't have a local store, then it becomes a bit more difficult. Then you may want to go online and try to find gaming communities that are local to you, like physically local, which can also be difficult. Yeah, so we'll see how that goes. That's the way to kind of go and try to see how it works out for you. When cleaning your airbrush with the ultrasonic, is there any post-maintenance that needs to be done, lubrication or such? Well, yes. The only thing that really needs to be done is you do sometimes need to lubricate. So, okay. So the airbrush is like this, and then there's the little trigger on the top. And that pops out along with most of the other parts when you dump it into the ultrasonic. When you put the thing all back together, that little trigger thing just kind of goes down sort of inside this hole, and the trigger's got a hole in it itself, and then the needle goes through and it holds it in and all that stuff. That's the only part that sometimes needs to be lubricated, because the trigger goes down into the nozzle at the bottom of the airbrush that you attach the hose to, okay? So when you press down on the airbrush part, or on the trigger, that's what allows the air to come up out of the hose and go into the airbrush and shoot at the front of the brush. So that part is spring-loaded, and that part does not come apart. You can't you take it out and clean it, but you can sort of lubricate it a little bit. So the bottom of the trigger part, there's usually most airbrushes come with a little tiny tube of this sort of light blue, kind of translucent-y lube, and then you put it in there, and then it helps to lubricate. That's the only kind of aftercare that I can think of, frankly. So yeah, definitely. Douglas Hooker says there's no movement trays in Saga, Adam. You should definitely play. The regular chainmail painting may get you down eventually, though. Yeah, I get that. Yeah, it's true though. I agree. It's nice that there's no movement trays. So that is one thing that I like about Saga. The only thing is that I don't know much. I don't know any people around here who play it and everything. But I would love to do a demo of it. Frankly, like maybe at I don't know, Adepticon or something like that. What I'd really like to do is maybe next year in June at Tabletop Minions Expo 2018. Maybe some people can come and run some Saga, and then I can play a demo then. I'm going to tell you what the date is for Tabletop Minions 2018, because I just got confirmation from the university just recently. The date for, and I'm going to put this on the website soon too anyway, the date for Tabletop Minions Expo 2018 is June 9th and 10th, 2018. June 9th and 10th, 2018. So, yeah, that if any of you, I mean, I know some of you here in the chat, I see the Noob Painter, he was there, came up from Texas. I saw Michael Strickler in here before. There he is right there. He came from Wyoming, and a lot of the people came up from the Chicago area, and Milwaukee, and all kinds of places, and it was a fun time. It was small. It was about 65 people, but it was a good time. So hopefully I can maybe play some Saga at least then, but I'd like to play it sooner than that too. Hopefully, like I said, at Adepticon. Let me see here. It looks like there's some sort of shenanigans going on between Matt and some of the people in the chat, which is fun. What else have we got? Can you suggest an ultrasonic to buy? I keep seeing them for like $100, and I kind of don't want to spend that much. I got one off of Amazon. I think it was $27 or something like that. It's white, it's about yay big, and kind of shaped a little bit like a football. Maybe more like a rugby ball. Like, it's all kind of rounded and capsule shaped. But if you just type in like ultrasonic jewelry cleaner on Amazon, you find one for less than $30. It's white. It's got like a flip up top. That's the one that I use. It's big enough to fit my airbrush. I can strap up a bunch of models in it. They used to sell it at Harbor Freight, which is where I used to buy them, but they were a bit more expensive, like $40. And then they stopped carrying that one at Harbor Freight, and now they only carry like a big honkin' one, which I think also has heat, which is probably good for some things, but maybe not great for plastic or resin, so I wouldn't necessarily use that for that. But And it's also, like I said, really big. So if you just want to use it for cleaning your airbrush, it's kind of overkill. And like I said, it's also expensive. So I would tell you to look on Amazon. I think if you go back and look at the video for what's an ultrasonic cleaner good for on my channel, I believe I've got at least screenshots of the one that I bought from Amazon. So you could take a look at that. VJ Morph says, okay, looks like I'm going to be visiting the United States in June 9th and 10th of next year. Well, we'll be glad to have you, VJ. That'd be fun. Bloodthirst asks, can I use craft store items for terrain? I've got a video very much about that called "Don't Be Afraid of the Craft Store," or Man Up and Go to the Craft Store, I think was the name of the video. If you look on my channel, you'll find that. Yeah, there's all kinds of interesting things for terrain, specifically at the craft store. So go do that. Yeah, I've got a whole video about it. You can check it out. The Noob Painter says, are you sure you have it reserved? Double plus sure? He's talking about the issues that I had getting the room for Tabletop Minions Expo this year, and how there were some communication issues. Those communication issues have been solved. So yes, we're good. It's good. Aaron Penny says, whereabouts is this expo? It is in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, which is sort of in the middle of Wisconsin, but a little bit over to the east. Yeah. And it's at the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh, and it's a small little place. Like I said, the expo was about 65 people, but it was a lot of fun, and I hope to be growing it a little bit. But it's just basically the idea behind the expo, and I've talked about this in the past, but the idea behind the expo is basically a place where you're going to come to learn about new games. It's not a tournament. It's not a competition of any kind along those lines. This year, there was somebody, well, the Noob Painter was running This Is Not a Test, and some guys came up from the Racine area and ran Flames of War on a big, super cool, huge board. They ran tanks. Some of those guys also ran Malifaux, so you could learn about Malifaux, you could learn about Flames of War, you could learn about the game Tanks, also from Battlefront. Like I mentioned earlier, my friend Peter ran Silent Death, which is a space combat game. He also ran Space Hulk. There was, oh gosh, what else was going on? There was, I'm just trying to picture it. I know Gaddis Gaming was running their game Shattered Crown over by their booth. And then the guys from Breaker Press, they were running Broken Contract, which is their post-apocalyptic kind of sort of hybrid board game. And that was cool. And there was a whole bunch of stuff going on. It was a lot of fun games. It was enjoyable. And again, it's just a place to kind of come and go and learn about new games and play some demos and stuff like that. And I may break out into trying to set up some areas for open gaming. We'll see how it goes. It's a little harder to do open gaming areas with, with a miniatures game convention, because if you want to have open gaming for board games, it's easy. You just have to have tables. People bring their own games. They set them up. All the stuff's in the box. But open gaming for the stuff that we do is a little bit more difficult, because if you want to do open gaming, then you also need to bring a mat and all the terrain, So usually if you go to a convention, the convention, if they're going to have an open gaming area, they try to have at least mats and maybe some terrain, and then you can just break out your guys. But then there are games that have have less in the way of terrain, and then there are other games that need more terrain. Like, you can't play Infinity on the same type of board that you might play 40K. Excuse me, because Infinity needs lots and lots and lots of cover, whereas 40K needs less. So that's kind of how it works these days. On the banks of Lake Winnebago. Yep, that's where it's at, VJ Morph. William says, I have family in that area. Might be able to go and drag some people to it. How much is it? I don't know if the price is going to change. Last year, it was $8. I think it was $8 for Saturday and $5 for Sunday. And I think it was $12 if you paid for the entire weekend, so you saved $1. It's, if you go to what is it? If you go to tabletopminions.org/TMX, you'll see all the information from this year's 2017 thing. So you'll see the list of the games. I just thought of that. You'll see the list of the games that were played. Well, most of them. There were some that just kind of hopped up and were sort of, ad hoc, just happened at the last minute. But most of them, you'll see the list there. You'll see the price. You'll see the location, all that jazz. So it's tabletopminions.org/TMX to find out the information. And that's where the information will be for next year's when it goes up soon. So there you go. VJ Morph says, I never knew those mobile homes were named after a lake. Yeah, I guess. It's, well, technically the lake, I think, is the lake named after a Native American? I think so. And anyway, it's definitely a Native American name, Winnebago. I've always heard that it stands for, I've always heard, and I don't know if this is true, but I've always heard that Winnebago was Native American of that particular tribe. I forget which tribe it was the lake of smelly water, which I don't think it smells that bad. I think it's fine, There are certain times of the year, like if the fish croak a little bit and sort of lay around on the sides of the water, then it can be a little smelly, but in general, the water is fine, as far as I can tell. If you wanted an elite heavy starter saga army, you could get away with painting 16 minis in a warlord. This wouldn't be a great army, but it would get you started. It's interesting about the differences. Like I've looked in the past in other games, not just Saga, but I've looked at the past. I'm like, well, what's the bare minimum number of models I could get? And then still make a feasible list. And I have found more and more that, yeah, sometimes those lists can be, I don't want to even say competitive, but useful in the game. But a lot of times, the fewer guys you have, the harder it is to win. Sometimes quality is quantity is a quality all its own. Not always. Obviously, like Orcs and Tyranids in the last couple of editions of 40K were a little rough, even though there was a whole bunch of them. Although they're getting a lot better now in 8th edition, from what I understand. So there's that. But yeah, it's interesting. It definitely is. Gaddis Gaming says, sign me up for Tabletop Minions Expo 18. All right, that sounds good. Definitely. We were glad to see you guys. It was you guys are running lots of cool demos. They've got a great game that they're working on right now called Shattered Crown, which is basically alternate history World War I. From what I remember, the results of the War of the Worlds were that, like, the War of the Worlds was not just a radio broadcast. It was played off as a radio broadcast that was just a story, but it actually really happened. And then the technology that was left behind by those Martians was kind of co-opted into machines of war, and so that's why it's alternate history World War I. And you have these vehicles that are more technologically advanced than normally World War I vehicles would have been. So it's a cool system, and they've got neat models for it and things like that. So they were running a bunch of demos there at the convention, which is a lot of fun. Decaybringer asked a question before about drinking a beer before you start painting to make it so that your hands don't shake. Whatever works. Some people cut back on caffeine so their hands don't shake, or they paint at a certain time of day. I shake less in the morning than I do at night, or I shake less at night than I do in the morning, or whatever. I have a tendency to, it's not so much about hand shaking, it's more about, I have a tendency to take ibuprofen before I start painting, because I do this a lot when I'm looking at the stuff that I'm painting, and I'm looking over the top of my glasses, and then that can cause eye strain after a while, and I know I shouldn't do it, but I keep doing it, and sometimes I just don't even realize I'm doing it. So then what happens is, if I do it without taking ibuprofen, after a couple of hours, I get this like crazy eye strain headache, and I'm just like, ow. So yeah, now what I do is, if I know I'm going to be if I'm planning on going down to the basement to paint for a couple hours, I'll just pop a couple ibuprofen before I go, and then I can paint longer. And I know this, again, not a good idea. I'm trying to fix it. I do have one of those crazy magnifying headset things, it's Velcro on the back, and it's got the thing, and then your eyes are really huge when you look at it. But I haven't used it much yet. It's really hard to get the hang of, because it's, I don't know, the depth perception on it's a little weird still, so I need to figure something out. VJ Morph, smelly water. Oh, yeah. Lee Marin says there's a reason we call it Lake Winniseptic and not Lake Winnebago. I've never called it Lake Winniseptic, but, you've lived here longer than I have. Because I was born in Neenah, which is 20 miles north of here, and I moved here when I was 4, so I'm not a townie, technically. Whatever. Anyway. And Michael Strickler says that jet ski rental in Oshkosh was inexpensive and fun. So, yes, when Michael came to the expo, he came and with his wife, and they went jet skiing, and they went and had seafood down in Fond du Lac at Salty's, and made kind of a trip of it. So that was fun. There's lots, especially in June, there's lots of cool stuff to do here, frankly, you know. Like if I was having the convention in, say, January, that would be not super awesome unless you were really into cross-country skiing or freezing to death outside. One of the two, you know, I guess there's that, but yeah. Melody Dawn says that she shakes like a Polaroid picture. You know, you're not supposed to do that. I mean, I get the reference, but the whole concept of shaking a Polaroid picture, I worked at a camera store in the 90s, so I'll tell you, when you do that, you make the picture actually blurry. Yeah, because it doesn't actually, like, that doesn't dry it off. But people used to do that. They just had it in their head, oh, I'll just dry this off so it'll be better, and that actually just makes it blurry. So, but I like that song, so, you know, a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B. What do we got here? Hidden Realms Designs asks, why is Kingdom Death so expensive? I don't know. There's a guy that I work with who got in on the most recent Kickstarter for them. And yeah, it was like $250. Now granted, it comes with a lot of models. And from what I understand, the models look very pretty. I mean, I've looked at them, at some of them. I haven't looked at them in depth, but I've looked at the, you know, pictures and things like that. I mean, I guess you get a whole bunch of stuff in that box. So I get that, you know, like games like, say, Space Hulk cost, I don't know, I think 100 or 110 bucks or whatever like that, but you get a bunch of really, really nice models in there. So I think it's part of that, but it's also probably part because they're a smaller company, and sometimes smaller companies, things cost more because they have less volume, so they don't, you know, like a company that knows it's going to make and sell 10,000 units of a game can work off a slightly smaller profit margin because they know it'll work out. But when you're a company and you know you're only going to sell 500, then the profit margin becomes a problem. So maybe that's what their problem is. I'm not sure. Guillermo says, one good thing that works for arm and hand shakes is a beer. Just one, but not many people drink at all. I learned this trick when I used to shoot air rifles in a club. Oh, that's interesting. Cicadas are getting crazy again. Yeah, I could see that. I mean, I could see like a beer, you know, kind of maybe smoothing things out a little bit. Like I said, I also know people who are like, if I have to paint tonight, then I don't have any, you know, caffeine after lunch, you know, or something like that. So I can see that. That makes sense. VJ Morph says, maybe try a jeweler's eye so you can take it in and out easier. You mean like one of those things where you see it on TV where the guy sticks it and like squeezes it? That would be no depth perception at all for me. Plus I would eventually get an eye cramp, I think, trying to hold that thing. I suppose if they have like a, you know, one that you could like put on somehow. I should get some of those glasses that have the little swivelly things that go in front or something like that, and then the magnifying would work that way. That might be a good idea. I mean, I've got bifocals already, so you would think, you know, that it would. Then I end up painting like this because I'm looking through the bottom of my glasses a lot, which is, you know, if it works, it works, but it's still difficult. I still end up looking over the top of my glasses. Nigel asks, what are the dates of your next expo? June 9th and 10th, 2018. Like I said, I'll be adding it to the website soon. But yep. The Noob Painter says the reason that the Kingdom Death stuff is very expensive is because it's boutique. I think that's a little bit of the same thing I was saying a little bit about, you know, because it's a smaller run, you know, or whatever, even though the Kickstarter did pretty well. So, you know, it's turning out not to be that small of a run. But I think it's also a situation of like, if it didn't do really well, then they still needed to be able to kind of cover it, which is why they had the price set. Now it's just turned out that it's done maybe more well than they thought. But yeah, I don't know. I've never played any of it. I keep hearing about it. I've seen some really cool images and stuff like that. And like I said, there's a guy at work who's eventually going to get it on Kickstarter or whatever. But yeah. Assel said, I heard bits of Adam talking about War on the Worlds, World War I alternate history game. It's called Shattered Crown by Gaddis Gaming. Gaddis Gaming. So take a look for that. Yeah, Gaddis Gaming's Shattered Crown. Biotrex says, hello, Uncle Adam. I used to do Warhammer 40k back in 08-09. I was 12, but I stopped due to lack of people to play with, but I've just bought some models off eBay. But but I got back a few weeks back with 2 friends to play with, but it seems that I've been winning every time we play. We're only playing 500 to 750 points right now. And it's starting to worry me that I might make them rage quit due to lack of winning, but it's because that we're still low on points. What are your opinion suggestions? The issue to some degree with 40K, and it's gotten slightly better with 8th, but it's still kind of a problem, is it does not scale well in small groups. There are certain armies that do really well at low point games, and other armies that don't. Like other armies that they're like really good stuff isn't very difficult to fit into a 500 point game. You know what I mean? With the requirements that you need of X amount of, you know, HQ units and X amount of troops. Like the really good stuff that they're known for does not really come into play until you're at least 1,000 points or 1,500 points. So some armies work really well in the small groups and other ones don't. We used to play a type of 40K back in the day called Combat Patrol. Combat Patrol had a bunch of different limitations of things you could and couldn't bring, and it was a 400 point game. And so Space Marines stunk at 400 points because they costed at the time like 18 points apiece or something like that. Whereas you could get a whole bunch of Tyranids or a whole bunch of Orcs for a lot cheaper in points-wise. And so again, that whole quantity becomes a quality thing, you know, comes into play. So that could be part of the issue you're having here. I'm finding like 1,000 points is not bad with the new 8th edition. You can have some fun games and things are not too squirrely. I find 1,500 points to be the best, and 1,500 points is not as many models as it used to be. So that kind of helps too. Like I played a 1,500 point game yesterday, and you know I had 3 squads of 10 or less guys, and then I had 3 HQ units, which were just like a single person each. It was like a Demon Prince, a Dark Apostle, and Typhus. So that's, at this point, we're like at about 30, roughly 30 models. And then I had a Forge Fiend, a Helldrake, and something else. There was a third thing. Oh, and my Plague Bloat Drone. So really, I only had, in 1,500 points, I only had about 33 models, which back in like 7th or 6th edition, a 1,500 point army generally was a lot more models than that. So, you know, once you guys get up to that, if you guys keep building to that point, I think you're going to find the games are going to even out a little bit more as far as power levels and stuff like that. So that should help. So many great new board games coming out thanks to Kickstarter. Filling up my linen press rather quickly. Yeah, I've tried to cut back a little bit on Kickstarter. I used to, because the thing is it's so easy to look at Kickstarter as like, well, look at all this stuff I'm going to get for cheap, you know, or for this relatively low price. And with certain board games, that's okay because you're like, well, we'll play this board game 3 or 4 times, and that's fine, and I'll put it on the shelf. But with miniatures, it's a bit more of a, you're putting more time into it. You're putting more just effort into it. You know, you got to build and paint these guys and all that kind of stuff. And again, it can dilute, like we talked about earlier, it can kind of dilute things when you're like, if I'm on 8 different, you know, hobby systems, or I'm on 8 different, you know, miniature systems now because I keep doing that, that can be difficult. So yeah, I've tried to make a little bit better choices as far as that kind of stuff is with Kickstarter. I think the most recent Kickstarter thing I actually got was, well, I haven't gotten it yet, but it's finished, was there's this company called Orange Monkey, I believe. And they make a product called Foldio. And I've talked about it before. It's like a light box, and it folds up, and then you unfold it, and it's got like little magnets in the sides, and that's what holds it in place. And then you can put a model or like a, you know, a miniature or whatever in there, and it's got little LED lights inside, and then you can take pictures, and you've got like a nice little white backdrop and all that stuff. And it's a good little thing for taking pictures of miniatures. So they made Foldio 1, which I did the Kickstarter 4 years ago. Then there was Foldio 2, which I didn't get into. Well, now they've got Foldio 3, and this thing's starting to get big now. Like it's like 2 feet, like you know, on a side, like a cube almost. And it's coming with newer like LED lights, but also some other lights and whatnot. And so I got in on that, but I haven't really, I haven't gotten it yet. So that was like the last Kickstarter that I've done. And it's just something it's going to make it easier for me to shoot models and you know, take pictures of the stuff that I've painted and things like that. So. Wouldn't something like Shadow Wars be good for starting Warhammer? Skirmish games like that and Mordheim are very interesting. Yeah, I mean that's the trick. Is if you're interested, if you're getting interested in games like that, especially if something like if you're interested in 40K, you may want to look into Shadow Wars because Shadow Wars is designed to be played with small. It's designed to be played with 40K models, some, not all of them, but some 40K models, and it's designed to be played with smaller groups. Like most armies in Shadow War can't be more than 10 models. Just outright straight can't be more than 10 models. The Genestealer cultists can go up to 15, and orcs I think can go up to a maximum of 20, but that's your entire army. So if you look at Shadow War, if you go buy a copy of the book or whatever at your local game store, it will show in there the list of all the different armies you can get and the models for each, and then you'd be like, you know, because then the thing is that, like, I was talking before about how I could build a Grey Knight list for Shadow War, and then if I want to, later on, I can take those Grey Knights and put them into my Space Marine list for regular 40K, because I can just mix them in, you know. So you can kind of look at it as a sort of a starter stepping stone sort of a thing, which is why they did it that way. It's just one of the reasons why Shadow War came out, frankly, was because of that. So, yeah. Yes, I would agree. I suggested to my Thousand Suns friend to get a Helldrake to get 1,000 points because I know my Blood Angels would have quite a hard time dealing with him. Yeah, Helldrake can be... He's okay. I ran him yesterday. He got gunned down pretty quick, but my opponent was pretty smart and knew what the toughest stuff in my army was, and he focused a lot of fire on it. And he was running Thousand Suns. Thousand Suns are no joke. So, yeah. Definitely. Torch says, I'm still excited for Giant Killer Robots. That's another Kickstarter that I do have coming. It should ship sometime towards the later part of this year. So I am definitely looking forward to that too, definitely. Sorcerer Dave says, Adam's vids are pretty much responsible for me getting into Age of Sigmar. I was able to blow away my misconceptions about the game given to me by my friends who were salty about fantasy going away. Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of that going on. There was a lot of people, like, at this little event I was at yesterday, there were people that I know, like these two guys, Broska and Roder, who used to run this podcast about Warhammer Fantasy called Skull Bros Awesome, which was a lot of fun to listen to. And when Fantasy switched over, they were both kind of like, initially they were like, nah, Age of Sigmar is just not doing it for me. And now both of them are really back into it. I mean, and they really enjoy it. I mean, they like some other stuff here and there too. Like both of them have kind of dipped their toe back into 40K as well. But they also really like Age of Sigmar. And I mean, I talked to those guys both at Adepticon this year, and they had been in one of the big Age of Sigmar tournaments and really had a good time. So, yeah, I mean, it's not fantasy, absolutely, but it is still really a lot of fun, and it's a lot of great modeling and painting because especially the new models they've been coming out with have been fantastic. So, yeah, you know, there was a lot of salt. I will agree. What else have we got? Have you played the Terminator war game / board game? If so, what did you think? I have not. I know that I believe it was written by Alessio Calvatore, who did a lot of the 5th edition rules for 40K, and I think he did a lot of the rules for Bolt Action. He's a good guy. I've not played the game, though. I think they have a copy of it at my local store, though. It's just been sitting on the shelf for quite some time. I don't know a ton about it. I mean, I know about, you know, the Terminator. Have I seen all the movies for Terminator? I think I have. No, I haven't seen the most recent one, which is what this is based off of. That's the one with Emilia Clarke, the Khaleesi or whatever her name is from she's from the Game of Thrones. I have not seen that one. I've seen parts of it on TV, but I haven't seen all of it. So I don't know a ton about it. But yeah, I don't know anybody around here that plays it either. But it seems kind of a very one-offy sort of, you know, like this is a, and you phrased it as war game / board game, and I do get that feeling. It's a little bit along the lines of, I think, some of the Mantic stuff, like Mantic's Walking Dead game it's a miniatures game, but it's kind of designed to be sort of self-contained. It's not like, you know, it's also a one-off. It's not like, oh, I'm going to bring my zombie army. You want to bring your survivor army? It's kind of how it works. You know what I mean? It's more of a, almost like zombie side, but bigger and less, you know, less of a board game, but still kind of in that vein. It's kind of a gateway game, frankly. I mean, at least I think that the Walking Dead can be. I don't know if the Terminator game can be much of a gateway game, but yeah. Decaybringer says, we live in a smaller flat in Vienna. You don't have big living spaces, and my normal table has the edges has the edges of a 6x4 mat hanging down. I would need an inflatable gaming table or something like that. There was a company that made a cardboard 4x6 gaming table that folded up. And I don't remember the name at all, but I remember seeing it, I think, on Beasts of War. And I know there's also a company out there that makes a 4x6 type gaming table that like folds up or does something, and it gets a lot smaller, and it's metal, and like, yeah, I think it's metal like aluminum and stuff like that. So there are options out there. There are also options. There are people that build. One thing that I see a lot is that the normal like 30-inch by 6-foot like plastic conference table. You can get them like at Staples and Office Max and Walmart and all kinds of places like that. They have the little. They're usually like a white like blown plastic top, and then they have these fold-out legs, and they're 30 inches by 6 foot. They're sort of standard. There's a lot of people that will make 3 pieces of wood that are 2 feet by 4 feet. Okay, so you've got 3 pieces that are 2 feet by 4 feet, and you put them all together, and it makes a 6 by 4. And the trick is that on the underside of them, you run some rails. You glue or nail or screw or whatever some rails that are 30 inches apart, and they're centered, so that when you put them on the 30-inch conference table, those rails sit down on the edges so it doesn't slide too much. And then you can put those 3 pieces together, but then they're pretty easy to pick up all 3 of those pieces and put them in a closet or something like that, when you're not using that. So that's an option too. Some people like to do that, and it does help because it's rough with a 4x6. If the table's not big enough and it's hanging off, that can be problematic. Oh, what else have we got? Am I the only one who heard Terminator board game and thought they were talking about Space Hulk? Well, there are Terminators in that. That's true. But no, we're talking about the Terminator like the movie. Like with the Arnold Schwarzenegger and all that. Yeah, definitely. Patrick says, finally assembled my Space Wolves Grey Hunters pack. Now it is time to use CA glue and baking soda basing technique. Yes. And very eventually soon I will actually make that video, and I will try not to glue the base and the bottle of glue to my fingers or to my face or in my hair, and I will try to make a successful version of that video as opposed to the one that I attempted earlier this year, which was not successful at all. Michael Strickler says, hey Adam, I just looked up giant killer robots on Google, and one of your videos is right there. You're Google famous too. Well, that's fun. It was a cool. I think it's a cool looking game. I love the artwork, and I like the concept a lot. It's a very different concept. It's not just the normal like, oh, these guys go to war and shoot at each other because of reasons. It's it's a little bit more. It's a very different kind of reason, and it's almost a little satirical. A little bit, because you're like, oh, we're having this war and destroying this city because it's a game show kind of a thing. Or we're turning it into a game show because why not? Because that's the way that our world works now. But yeah, so that's, I think, very interesting, and I'm looking forward to playing it. I mean, it's definitely more board game than miniatures game, absolutely. But it's also again, I think it's going to work as it's a perfect gateway game to me in that it seems kind of like a board game, but it has these miniatures, and you have to learn about range and line of sight and some of the easier sort of beginner concepts that a lot of times board gamers don't have to think about too much because they're just like, oh, I just have to move these guys from here to here to this area, and then this will happen. In this situation, you're like, if I move this model over here, it will be more likely to be able to see that guy, but now he can see me as well, and so I have to concern myself with that. And that's the whole concept behind, what I've talked about in the past as gateway games. I did a big video about gateway games years ago, talked about X-Wing being a good gateway game for people, Space Hulk, a bunch of other ones in there as well. So, we just got someone talking about Lionel Johnson says GameMat.eu makes a folding table. I think that's one of them. Yeah. What else? Any thoughts on the Reaper Bones Kickstarter? The Bones Series 4 Kickstarter launches tomorrow. Seems cool, but add-ons and the sheer number of models is daunting. I almost pulled the trigger on the first Reaper Bones Kickstarter back in 2013, 14, whenever that one was. I was looking at it and I was like, I really want like these 5 models from here. So what I'll do is I'll drop whatever it was, $125 and get these 300 models and then I'll cherry pick out the ones I want and then sell the rest of them on eBay. And I was almost about to click on it, and I thought, or will everybody else be doing the same thing? This is not necessarily this is not necessarily a brilliant, ground-shaking idea, and that's true. Everybody else was like, wow, I really only want like a third of these models, so I'll buy all of them and then try to sell them all the rest on eBay. And then, of course, they've become commoditized to some degree. So I don't see myself pulling a trigger on those. What I did later instead was I just went out and bought those models that I was interested in from that set for cheaper and did not pay $125 and then have to ship or try to ship models all over the world to try to get rid of the ones I didn't want. So, yeah, that's the trick. If you want a ton of models and they've got a bunch of cool stuff in there and you want most of those, great. Then you should definitely go with those because the Bones models can be really cool. But if you're buying them as an investment because you just want some of the models and you want to sell the rest of them on eBay and make money, ain't going to happen, frankly, because everybody else is doing the same thing. It's just like any comic book that you see that says, oh, it's a special collector's edition. Anything that says special collector's edition is generally not a special collector's edition because, it's just not how it works. It's like you can't make up your own nickname. Well, usually. I've kind of made up my own nickname, I guess. Anyway, Adam, how do you build your Warhammer lists? Poorly. Are you using Battlescribe or something else? Ugh, God, I wish. I'm trying to find something to help me build those. When 8th first dropped, there was a guy who made a website that was a really nice, easy-to-use list builder. He was shut down, which we all knew he was going to be because he was using, like, imagery from Games Workshop and he was doing all this stuff. But it was a really good system. It was a great army builder that worked out really nice. He was hoping that, because he had a Patreon and I read some stuff on his Patreon, he was hoping, because somebody did the same thing for Age of Sigmar, and instead of shutting them down, Games Workshop said, we're just going to take all that, like they worked out a deal or something, I don't know what it was, but they probably worked out some sort of deal, and if you go to the Warhammer community website right now, up in the upper left or upper right corner, I forget what, there's a little button that says, hey, this is where the Age of Sigmar list builder is, and it's right there, and it's the same guy, it's this different guy's list builder. This guy who made the one for 40K was kind of hoping they were going to do the same thing, and they did not for 40K. I think because they're going to eventually make their own, but they're being slow about it. Right now, I would love to have a great, because like yesterday I'm playing this game and I'm just flipping through the book. Oh, what's the strength on that weapon? Ah, crap. And then flip, flip, flip. So I should probably take a look at Army Builder again. I used to use Army Builder back in the day, but they haven't really updated it in a long time, and so I'm not sure about it. I don't have great luck with Battlescribe, so I guess I need to give another running jump at it. But I know on my phone, when I try to build lists with Battlescribe on my phone, I never seem to get it to work quite right. So, I don't know. I have yet to find the list builder that I really dig, and I stink at Excel. So I know there's a lot of people out there who just use Excel and make their own thing, but yeah, I'm terrible at Excel because I'm an art nerd, not a Excel nerd. So I don't know. I got to find something though because it is a problem right now. I really hope the Games Workshop makes something decent that's not too expensive, because I would really like that. That would be best. It'd be great to have all the stuff on my phone or my iPad, honestly. So what else have we got here? Twerch says that Battlescribe is his new happiness, so I'll have to take a look at it again. Like I said, I was messing with it about 3 weeks ago on my phone, and like I tried to build a list that I had already like done in my head, and I'm like, well, I'll just punch it into Battlescribe and I'll have a printed copy of it. And I could not get it to match up with what I was doing on paper. So either I was completely misunderstanding the list on paper somehow, I guess it's possible, or I don't know, I didn't, something else was goofy. I'm not sure yet. Surreal says, Adam is doing live now? Yeah, every other Sunday I do a live show from 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. my time, which is the central time zone. I've been doing it since, oh gosh, May of 2016, or maybe earlier, March 2016. Been doing it for quite a while. And this show is currently live, but if you watch it later on, just while you're painting or whatever, it won't be live, but it'll be recording, and then you won't get to see the chat, which is, one thing, but there it is. So yeah. What is DA and SW? Usually DA is Dark Angels and SW is Space Wolves. At least if you're talking about the abbreviations. And somebody else has already said that, so there you go. Adam, what is your opinion on the Games Workshop special editions like the 8th edition rules or the Primaries edition codexes? Are they cashing the fans, or is there some value? To me, there's no value. I'm not interested in those at all. That being said, there are some people who are like, oh, I love that stuff, and they want to like, and they're because they're collectors, which is fine. I'm not a collector. I just want the information. I appreciate a good-looking book. Don't get me wrong, but I'm not really super interested in paying a big premium for a good-looking book sometimes. And I'm not really. I mean, from what I understand, the 8th edition like special edition was like $420 American. There's no way in hell I'm going to spend that. But there were people out there that did because that's the kind of thing that they like, which is fine. So Games Workshop's, you know, if they know there are people out there who might be interested in it, and it doesn't cost them too much to make it, and they make a decent enough profit margin, yeah, knock yourself out. I'm not going to tell people that they shouldn't like what they don't like, or shouldn't like what I like, whatever. But the fact is that yeah, for me, it's not a thing. So, yeah, it's 11. I've got to get a bunch of stuff going on for later on this afternoon. I'm shooting. I'm doing a photo shoot later on for a friend of mine. His daughter is a high school senior, and I'm doing a bunch of photos for her senior pictures and stuff. And you know, it's, like when I was a kid, you know, back in the late 80s, your senior picture was like, you know, it was a backdrop and you wore a suit and the whole deal, all that stuff. And nowadays it's like, you know, it's more like modeling type photography. You can be out, you know, downtown and it's whatever. So we're going to be doing that, which will be fun. But yeah, that's where we're at. So everybody, thanks again. And I hope you had a good time. And I hope I was able to answer maybe one of your questions. Maybe. We'll see how that goes. And we'll see you in 2 weeks at the next live show. Same time, same channel. And I hope you guys have a good day and keep hobbying. And thanks for watching.